Dear students, so far we have discussed two lessons, namely reproduction as well as human reproduction. Now the third one is reproductive health. I hope the first two lessons you gained certain ideas. By the time you see this video, the textbooks will be in your hand. Okay? So reproductive health. See, the case of a human reproductive system and its functioning. In the previous lesson, we have discussed about the cycles, that is menstrual cycle, parturition, etc. So, the reproductive health, the third lesson, deals with certain problems associated with this. You know, our country, India, since 1951, took certain steps in the direction of family planning. Later, the family planning program was modified into maternal and child health care programs, MCH, maternal and child health care programs. You know, this program, MCH program, has certain principles. One, to create an awareness for the need of family planning or birth control. Two, to address the problems during the adolescence period, that is to address the various problems of adolescence. The third one, to give proper care during the period of pregnancy to the mother. 4, it also concerned with adopting some sort of family planning methods like that. It is a number of principles, that is though primarily the family planning program, but to know about the need for the programmed planned family to address the problems of this adolescence, to give care to the mothers, prenatal as well as postnatal care, then making the people to adopt some sort of family planning methods or the various principles. You know, if you were to know something about the amniocentesis and its statutory banning. This amniocentesis is basically a prenatal technique used before birth, prenatal technique to identify the chromosomal aberrations of the embryo. So, the same prenatal test amniocentesis was later misused. It was misused to identify the sex of the developing fetus. So, as it was used to identify the sex of the developing fetus, Government of India has banned amniocentesis. You know, there are two terms you might have heard so far. One is feticide and another one is infanticide. Feticide and infanticide. If the fetus, developing embryo, is killed, then it is feticide. Instead of that, if the newborn is killed, then it is infanticide. So, feticide killing the developing embryo, whereas infanticide is the killing the infant or the newborn. Actually, in our country, the ratio between the females and males, there is gradually the gap is increasing. You know, once it was for 1,000 females, 926 males were there. Now even it was reduced to 919 males for 1,000 females. That is the already this that is sorry, what I said is in the wrong manner. That is for 1,000 males. It was previously 926 females were there. Now it is just 919 females. As the female child is either subjected to feticide or infanticide, the ratio of a male and female is drastically changing. As you know, in a family we need a male for a female, or a female for every male. So the ratio has to be maintained. That is, for 1,000 males there has to be 1,000 females. But this feticide and infanticide reduced this ratio drastically. Nowadays, government has taken number of steps to reduce the gender inequality. You know, whatever people think that the male gender is superior than that of the female gender, like that. So, government has taken number of steps to prevent the balance between the males and females. So, gender inequality is there. Like that, number of steps are taken to protect the girl child, as well as even the FOSCO Act to protect the girl child, even protecting the women in their workplace, because they have the every right like that of the males. In the developing society, both the male and females have to work. As both males and females have to work, the females have to go out of the house. So there has to be protection in their working places, so that the productivity will be increased. Then they will have that is a civilized normal life. So Government of India has taken number of steps in this direction. Here that is you have to know something about the family planning methods. The family planning methods may be temporary methods, or even it may be permanent methods. Even it may be the natural methods or the artificial methods. If you take this one, the permanent methods, as you know that they are the surgical methods. If you take this, the natural methods. In the case of the natural methods, the first one, there are 4 steps are there in the natural method. They are continued absistence, the periodic absistence, then coitus interruptus, lactation amenorrhea, are the various ways of the natural methods. So the periodic absistence, that is, in the menstrual cycle, you have studied that there is a ovulatory phase. The ovulation takes place during that phase only. Such a ova that is liberated from the ovary, that will remain alive for 2 days, 48 hours. Even if you take the semen, that can be alive in the vaginal tract for roughly 72 hours. So if you avoid coitus during this period, or physical union during this period, the process of fertilization can be prevented. Then if you take this, that is the periodic absistence. The second one is a continuous absistence. In the case of this continuous, so fearing that there may be conception, for a long period avoiding coitus or the physical union. Continuous absistence is avoiding physical union for a long period. So that is the second way. The third one is the coitus interruptus. So here the male takes out his penis just before the ejaculation. That's what we call it as the coitus interruptus. taking out the penis before the ejaculation, so coitus interruptus. And finally, if you take this one, lactation amenorrhea. In the case of the lactation amenorrhea, the feeding, breastfeeding is mainly stimulated by the prolactin or the lactogenic hormone. See, as long as the breastfeeding is there, from the adenohypophysis, the lactogenic hormone or the prolactin is produced. When the prolactin is produced, that to a certain extent, not always, to a certain extent, it will reduce the production of follicle stimulating as well as the luteinizing hormone. So the follicle stimulating hormone for the process of growth of the graphene follicle and the luteinizing hormone for the ovulation. So this process, as long as the lactation is there, the production of these hormones are limited, but it is not a dependable method. So lactation amenorrhea. So continuous abstinence, periodic abstinence, coitus interruptus, lactation amenorrhea are the various ways of natural methods. If you take this one, the artificial methods. Among the artificial methods, there are barrier methods are there. If you take the barrier methods, the barrier methods there may be chemical barriers, or even it may be the synthetic barriers, or diaphragms, caps, etc. So chemical barriers. So the taking in of certain tablets may produce the foam in the vaginal tract, or it may produce certain substances, mucus-like substances, which prevent the movement of the sperm. So all these we call it as the chemical barriers. So chemical barriers, production of certain chemicals in the passage, that is the vaginal passage, prevent the movement of the sperm. Then if you take this one, the second one is the mechanical barriers. Among the mechanical barriers, so here the synthetic things such as condoms are used. So you know the condoms which retain the ejaculated sperm from reaching the vaginal tract. So the condom is actually a mechanical barrier. This mechanical barrier condom prevents the ejaculated semen from reaching the womb. And if you take this the third one, that is the use of the diaphragms or the cervical caps. So if you take this one, the use of diaphragms or cervical caps, these are generally placed in the case of the cervix. So here the synthetic things, the cervical caps or the diaphragms, prevent the ejaculated semen from reaching the womb. So these are the barriers. So if you take the barriers may be chemical barriers, mechanical barriers, or it may be a diaphragm or cervical caps. Even if you take this one, intrauterine devices. So these are the devices which are placed within the uterus. These devices either alter the process of ovulation or alter the process of implantation. So like that, if you take this one, the intrauterine devices, the intrauterine devices may be the copper releasing intrauterine devices, then non-copper releasing intrauterine devices, or medicated intrauterine devices. So if you take this intrauterine devices, the devices which are placed within the uterus, which prevent either the process of ovulation or alter or prevent the process of implantation, they may be copper releasing intrauterine devices. So commonly the copper T, or Cu380. In the case of this one, here it releases copper. This copper prevents the process of implantation. Then if you take this one, non-copper releasing, so number of intrauterine devices are there which are not having copper, so non-copper intrauterine devices. Medicated intrauterine devices, so if you take this one, the medicated intrauterine devices, number of intrauterine devices are there, the intrauterine devices which are having certain medicines. So like that, the intrauterine devices are there. Then if you take this one, the hormonal methods, hormone methods are mainly the contraceptive pills. The contraceptive pills may be the combined pills. that is, it is mainly formed of progesterone. The combined pill, that is the pills, that is a hormonal method which alter the process of ovulation, which alter the process of conduction of ovum. All these are carried out by these hormones. So hormonal method is there. So if you take this Shagali, which is produced by Central Drug Research Institute at Lucknow, which is one such a contraceptive pill, then so all these are the natural methods, or even if you take this one, the mechanical or the barrier methods, even if you take this one, the IUDs, Intrauterine Devices, or hormonal. All these are the temporary methods. There are permanent methods for them. The permanent methods are the surgical methods. Among the permanent methods or the surgical methods are two: vasectomy as well as a tubectomy. The vasectomy is a permanent surgical method of the males, where the vas deferens is cut as well as it is ligated. Tubectomy is a permanent birth control method in the case of females, where the fallopian tube is cut as well as ligated. Like that, the vasectomy and tubectomy are the permanent methods. The permanent methods are the surgical methods. Like that, the number of contraceptive methods are there. So you have to know something about the sexually transmitted infections. Number of infections which are transmitted through the sexual contact. The infections which are transmitted through the sexual contact may be bacterial, it may be viral, it may be fungal, or it may be protozoan also. So the sexually transmitted infections which are transmitted mainly through the sexual contact. If you take this, the bacterial sexual transmitted infections, STIs, sexual transmitted infections, they are syphilis is there, gonorrhea is there, then chancroid is there, lymphogranuloma venereum is there. So syphilis is there, gonorrhea is there, chancroid is there, lymphogranuloma venereum. All these are the bacterial sexually transmitted infections. Like that, there are viral sexually transmitted infections are there. The viral sexually transmitted infections are genital herpes, genital warts, 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 then viral hepatitis, AIDS. So these are the viral sexually transmitted infections. If you take this one, protozoan, trypanosoma causes trypanosomiasis. Trypanosoma causes trypanosomiasis. So the trypanosomiasis is the protozoan. And finally, fungal is there. If you take the fungal, Candida albicans causes candidiasis. So the candidiasis is a fungal sexually transmitted infection. So the infections which are transmitted through the sex are termed as the sexually transmitted infections. The sexually transmitted infections may be bacterial or viral or protozoan, even fungal. Bacterial may be syphilis is there, gonorrhea is there, then chlamydia is there, chlamydiasis is there, chlamydiosis, then lymphogranuloma venereum. All these are the chancroid, all these are the bacterial. Among the viral, genital herpes, genital warts, then viral hepatitis. Even if you take this one, this HIV, then if you take this protozoan, trypanosoma, if you take this fungal, candidiasis, all these are the sexually transmitted infection. So how to prevent these sexually transmitted infections? The prevention of these sexually transmitted infections are mainly to avoid contact with unknown persons. Then to use condoms. 3. If at all you have the doubt of such infections, immediately consult a doctor and take full treatment. So, in the case of steps to avoid these sexually transmitted infections, first of all, avoid contact with unknown persons, use condoms, and if you take the third one, if at all you have a doubt, then consult a doctor and take full treatment. And if you take this one, infertility, inability to have children is known as infertility. So the number of factors are there. The factors that are responsible for infertility may be tumor in the pituitary. There may be certain defect in the ovary, or there may be malformed oviducts. Number of causes are there. So if you take the infertility is unable to have children, if you take this infertility or the condition where unable to have children, maybe that is due to certain tumorous growth in the pituitary gland, because the pituitary gland only produces gonadotropins, so there may be tumors, or tumors in the case of ovary. Even if you take this one, there may be malformed fallopian tube or the oviduct, etc. Even if you take the number of other causes are there. Use of wearing of tight clothings. The wearing of tight clothings which may increase the temperature of the abdomen, then that may cause the infertility. Undescended testes in the case of males. As you know, in the second lesson, human reproductive system, I told you the testes are placed outside the body in the scrotal sac. If the testes fail to descend into the scrotal sac, undescended testes, then that will be one of the causes of this infertility. Then you know that low body fat in the case of females, fearing that they may gain weight, the females take less food, even diet with low fat. That one may be a cause for this infertility. Then if you take this one, the pelvic diseases, certain diseases of the pelvic region may be a cause for infertility. Then hormonal effect, then poor nutrition during the early childhood. So number of factors are there for infertility. Wearing a tight clothing, undescended testes, then low fat intake, then that is poor nutrition during the childhood are some of the causes of infertility. And if you take this one in the case of that is ART, assisted reproductive techniques, for people who are unable to have children in the normal way, there are number of methods are there to have children. These are known as assisted reproductive techniques. A number of techniques are there. They are, one is intrauterine transfer, then in vitro fertilization, then gamete in vitro, that is a gamete in vitro fertilization, or that is gamete intra-fallopian transfer, GIFT. Zygote intra-fallopian transfer, ZIFT. Like the number of methods are there. So if you take this one, the case of this assisted reproductive technique, one is intrauterine, that is introduction. So for certain people, they transferring the sperm into the uterus. So if you transfer the sperm in the uterus, there the intrauterine transfer. Because in the infertility I left 2 points. One is, in the case of males, the male body produce antibodies against its own sperm. One such defect is there. The second one is the production of certain antibodies in the vaginal tract. If the antibodies are produced in the vaginal tract, the antibodies of the vaginal tract in turn kill or destroy the spermatozoon. So the spermatozoon is unable to reach the uterus. For that only what it is practiced is intrauterine transfer. So the sperm is directly transferred into the uterus. From there it gains its way in the fallopian tube, that is a ampulla, then isthmus, ambulatory junction, like that it reaches, isthmus, ampulla, so that is a way. So intrauterine transfer. Then if you take this one, in vitro fertilization, commonly known as the test tube babies. Under gonadotrophin treatment, ovaries are stimulated for the production of Graafian follicle. It is monitored using the ultrasound sonography. When the egg develops, the egg is taken out from the body. Then when the egg is taken out, using the sperms, the eggs are fertilized in the lab in the test tube. Once the fertilization is over, the zygote is formed. Zygote undergoes cell division through 4-8 cell. At this 8-celled stage, one of the embryo is implanted into the uterus, while the other embryos are frozen and kept for future use. So, if in vitro fertilization, the case of the in vitro fertilization under the gonadotrophin treatment, Graafian follicle are stimulated in the ovary. When the Graafian follicle grow, it is monitored using ultrasound sonography. Then these developed Graafian follicle are taken out. Sperms collected from the husband or a suitable donor is used for fertilization. Then the zygote is formed. Zygote develops into 2-cell, 4-cell, 8-cell. At the 8-cell stage, one of the embryo is implanted in the uterus, whereas the other embryos are frozen for future use. That we call it as in vitro fertilization. Gamete intra-Philippian transfer. So, introducing the gamete into the fallopian tube. The first one I told you, intrauterine transfer, IUT. Here, gift gamete intra-Philippian transfer. The sperms are directly transferred into the fallopian tube. If the sperms are directly transferred in the fallopian tube, there may be natural fertilization, then natural implantation. So, gift gamete intra-Philippian transfer. The next one is a zygote intra-Philippian transfer. In the case of the zygote intra-Philippian transfer, that we extract out the ovum. The ovum is fertilized with the sperm. After fertilizing the ovum, now the zygote is formed. The zygote is transferred into the fallopian tube. That is zygote intra-Philippian transfer. So the zygote intra-Philippian transfer. So where the zygote is introduced, the normal implantation takes place. Cytoplasmic sperm injection. The ovum is taken. Within the ovum, sperm, which is taken at the ratio of 1000 into 1 lakh. The sperms are introduced into the ovum. So that is intracytoplasmic injection. Like that, number of methods are available. So one is the intra-Philippian transfer, the intrauterine transfer IUT. then in vitro fertilization, then gift gamete intra-Philippian transfer, zygote intra-Philippian transfer, then sperm cytoplasmic injection are the various ways of assisted reproductive technique. Even for people, if all these fail, for them they can have a method known as surrogacy. You know, in the case of surrogacy, that is, uterus is for rent. Proper agreement is made. So, as a proper agreement is made, under this agreement, a woman carries a baby for another person. Here, the fertilization takes place by means of in vitro fertilization. After that, the implantation takes place, there may be normal development. You know, in the case of this in vitro fertilization, the case of in vitro fertilization, the normal case, then it is introduced into the woman who has entered in the agreement with a person, so that we call it as the surrogacy. So, surrogacy is once again a way to have children. So, all these are some of the ways of having assisted reproductive techniques, or the ARTs. So, if you take this one, the population explosion. In our country, population is steadily increasing. Then, our Indian population is 126 crores. By the time 2022, our population may surpass the population of China. Now, the most populated country in the world is China. But they have taken number of steps to size or to limit their population. But in our country, still the size of the population is steadily increasing. As a stride of the size of the population is steadily increasing. Already, Indian population was 126 crores. By the time 2022, our population will surpass the population of China. That's why such a sudden increase in the population, we call it as a population explosion or the population bomb. As the population is steadily increasing, we have to take a number of steps to limit the size of the family. There, what we have discussed about various family planning methods. You know that during the time of pregnancy, number of tests as well as a number of instruments are used. You know, one is the fetoscope is there. Chorionic villi sampling is there. Even the amniocentesis is there. You know, amniocentesis, I told you earlier, amniocentesis. You know, in the previous lesson we have discussed that certain extraembryonic membranes will develop. Developing fetus will be there. The developing fetus will be covered by 4 membranes. The innermost membrane is known as amnion. So, the fluid between the amnion and the developing embryo is known as amniotic fluid. You know, the amniotic fluid will be having certain cells of the developing embryo. So, the layer or the innermost layer that covers the embryo is known as amnion. The amnion is filled with the fluid. That fluid is known as amniotic fluid. If you take the amniotic fluid will have certain cells of the embryo. As amniotic fluid is having certain cells of the embryo, there that is, I experienced a physician by using a long needle can take out a ml of amniotic fluid that will have the cells of the fetus. As the amniotic fluid is having the cells of the fetus, karyotyping of the chromosomes are carried out. So, karyotyping of the chromosomes basically reveals any chromosomal aberration of the child. But our people wrongly use it to predict the sex. So that is the first one is amniocentesis, taking the amniotic fluid, karyotyping the chromosome, identifying the chromosomal abnormalities. The second one is chorionic villi sampling. So I told you on the other day the placenta. The placenta is a tissue formed between the mother as well as the child. You know, the chorion, which is outermost layer of the developing embryo, the chorion will form finger-like projections known as the chorionic villi. By sampling the chorionic villi, we can find out any development abnormality in the case of the fetus. So that is the chorionic villi sampling is there. And the third one is a fetoscope. You know, the normal heart movement of the fetus will be between 120 to 180. So here for us roughly 72 to 80. So 120 to 180 beats per minute is there in the case of the heartbeat of the fetus. There is one instrument which is used to find out the heartbeat rate of the fetus. That we call it as the fetoscope. That fetoscope is used to find out the heartbeat rate. So that is also one instrument that is used to find out. So these are the three techniques as well as the instrument. Amniocentesis is there, chorionic villi sampling is there, as well as the fetoscope are there. So like that, there are a number of methods and techniques are there in the case of that is a reproductive health of human beings. So medical termination of a pregnancy. So voluntarily terminating the pregnancy is known as the medical termination of pregnancy, what we call commonly the abortion. So if the pregnancy is unwanted or that one may be forced due to raping of a minor, then it has to be terminated. There is a regulation law that after 1971 allowing medical termination of pregnancy legally subjected to certain conditions. So voluntarily terminating pregnancy is known as a medical termination of pregnancy. Then if the pregnancy is unwanted or by means of chorionic villi sampling or amniocentesis, it has been found that there are certain abnormalities are there. In that case, the pregnancy is to be terminated. The government of India legalized this medical termination of pregnancy in 1971. Once again, the medical termination of pregnancy is safe during the first trimester, first 3 months, within the first 12 weeks. The MTP, medical termination of pregnancy, after that may affect the health of the mother. Once again, this MTP is carried out by an experienced physician or experienced doctor. But the MTP carried out by unauthorized quacks or unqualified persons may affect the life of the mother. Then cervical cancer. Cancer of the cervix is known as the cervical cancer. If you take this one, the cervical cancer, it is mainly due to the infection of human papilloma virus, HPV. So the HPV, human papilloma virus, causes the cervical cancer. See, there may be a number of factors for cervical cancer. Persons having a number of sexual partners may have the cervical cancer, or even the infection of this virus causes the cervical cancer. So it is better to have a cervical checkup after 30 years of age. It is better to have a checkup of the cervical region. You know, nowadays we are having a vaccine to prevent the cervical cancer. That vaccine is given to the females at the age of 9 to 13. So the diagnosis, the cervical cancer can be diagnosed by the pap smear. Then apart from the pap smear, even if you take this MRI or a CT scan can be used to diagnose the cervical cancer. Then here the treatment include surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, etc. So that is a cervical cancer. Cancer of the cervix is known as cervical cancer, mainly caused by the infection of human papilloma virus. So here it is mainly affect the person who are having number of sexual partners. If you take this cervical cancer, this cervical cancer can be diagnosed by taking a pap smear or CT or MRI scan. Even treatment include the chemotherapy, radiotherapy, surgery, etc. Once again, if you take this one, the cervical cancer can be prevented by taking vaccine to the females by the age of 9 to 13. Once again, for preventing this, it is better to have a medical checkup annually after the age of 30 by the females. So, dear students, in this third lesson, I have given you the outline of what this human reproductive health. So with this we complete the first unit. As at the beginning I told you, by the time you view this, you will be having the textbook. You know, now the COVID-19 or the corona is spreading at the fastest rate in our locality. Even in your hamlets, in your villages, there may be infected 4 or 5 infected cases. Dear students, as far as possible, avoid moving out of your homes. Always wear mask when you move out. Then take all the precautionary steps. Take the nutritious food which is available in your home. Keep social distancing, because health is more precious. Sound mind only in the sound body. So please take care of your health. As you know something about COVID-19, it is your duty to create awareness to the members of your family and persons around your house. Okay, students, thank you. Be safe. We'll once again meet. Thank you.